everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of Guest-Centric's latest in travel podcast. I'm very excited to have with me today Linde Borger and Edwin Schaerlaeckens from Hotels for Trees. Both of them are regional directors across Europe and the US, respectively. And they have a really interesting project that works or contributes directly towards making a greener hotel industry. So first of all, thank you both very much for joining us. I gave like a brief introduction, but for those that are watching and might not know, and I guess we can start with you, Linde. Do you mind just giving a brief background of like what you've been doing the past like years, and sort of the journey up until today and this current project and so on?
Yeah, sure. My name is Linde Borger. Thank you very much for having me. I'm born and raised in the Netherlands, but lived about 11 years abroad. And I'm responsible for the global operations and expansion of Hotels for Trees. Hotels for Trees, we started about 3 years ago. Previously, I've worked in the hotel industry for about 14 years. I graduated from the Standen NHL Hotel Management School in the north of the Netherlands, where I spent my final year as a reservation and review assistant manager in the Hilton on Curaçao. So this is where my career with Hilton started. And I ended up working for Hilton Hotels for about 14 years. I've moved back to the Netherlands, did a bit of operation in supervisory roles, and then I soon discovered that I was more of a commercial girl. So I started fulfilling lots of leadership roles within the commercial departments of Hilton Hotels in the Netherlands, but also abroad. I lived in Australia for 5 years, where I did an event sales manager role, so again in the commercial department. And then I moved to South Africa for a few years, where I was responsible for developing the conference and events teams in the hotels in Southern Africa for Hilton. And eventually, I also did a bit of travel, took a break, and traveled through the east coast of Africa for 9 months together with my husband in a Land Rover Defender. And then I moved back with Hilton into a corporate role in Dubai, where I was responsible for developing and driving the revenues in the conference and events department for all the hotels in MEA and Turkey, which is a very interesting role. Got to develop lots of beautiful individuals and work with senior leadership. I was also part of the Global Travel with Purpose Committee with Hilton. And I guess their seeds were planted to pursue a career in the more sustainable travel industry at some point. These seeds were also planted through my trip through Africa, where I had the privilege to meet a lot of beautiful people and projects that were done in the more underdeveloped countries. And eventually during my role in Dubai, COVID hit, and I lost my corporate role within Hilton. Many corporate roles were made redundant, and I moved back to the Netherlands. And there, I decided to solely focus my efforts on a sustainable future. I ran into Floris Licht, who I had been working with in the Netherlands for Hilton. And he, at that time, was a GM of Novotel, Schiphol Airport. And he had the privilege of finalizing an executive MBA. And one of his theses was about Hotels for Trees. And during COVID, he was obviously running low occupancy, so didn't have any excuse anymore, but not to implement the concept of Hotels for Trees. And I came back and we sat together. We had lunch, and I told him that I wanted to support him with that. So we basically started Hotels for Trees, 1st of July 2021 together. And that's the journey so far. So 3 years I've been working for Hotels for Trees now, with lots of excitement.
Interesting. It's cool what you mentioned about the cross Africa, like on the 4x4. Whereabouts did you go? Just like across the whole continent? Because I lived in South Africa for most of my life, actually.
Oh, did you? Oh, amazing.
So that was quite cool.
Yeah. No, I
Interesting.
lived in Johannesburg for 3 years, and then
Nice.
the east coast of Africa we traveled. So, but I was also I had traveled Namibia a bit already because I was responsible for one of the Hilton hotels there as a commercial head. Because the last 2 years in South Africa, I was head of commercial for 3 properties, and then I traveled Botswana, Malawi, and then up no, Zambia as well, Tanzania, Kenya, and then Ethiopia, Sudan, which was most impressive, and then Egypt. And then we shipped our car to Mersin, Turkey, and then through the Balkan states back to the Netherlands.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. It's cool, and also I guess very good, or I guess you'd say the opportune moment in terms of starting this the project, the Hotels for Trees project during the pandemic, because I think that seems to have certainly shifted everyone's kind of mindset a little bit. I think it was always talked about before, but like during the pandemic, it was just with the less like reduced like travel, everyone was like, oh wow, actually we maybe need to take a step back on this. So yeah, interesting to hear that. And Edwin, how about you? Would you like to give some background on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you as well for having us, Melissa. Much appreciated, and providing this opportunity to tell a little bit more to you and the listeners what we're about to endeavor here. So my name is Edwin Schaerlaeckens, also born and raised in the Netherlands. But I've been living in the US for 18 years now. Before that, I also lived in Sweden and Belgium, and before that, the US as well. So a bit of a nomad as well. I'm not sure if I can compete with all of your interesting journeys, but I'll do my best. I am very happily early retired after a 35-year-long career at 3M company. So the Post-Note company, the Scotch company, also the PFAS company. So trying to make up for those cents a little bit right now. And that's actually what I'm trying to do right now as well. Is I would like to make the world a little bit of a better place by planting some trees as a hobby or as a volunteer with Hotels for Trees. So my responsibility is North America, and I did, just like Linde and Flores did. I did open up my own 501c3 nonprofit foundation here as well, similar to what Hugo did in Australia and Linde and Flores in the Netherlands. So I have some skin in the game from that perspective as well. So Linde, Hugo, Flores, and myself, we work as a team, and we each have our areas and regions, but we help each other and we overlap. And Linde has been here from the start, so she's great to work with.
Cool, very cool. And so I know that Linde, you kind of mentioned like when the project was founded and so on, but and I guess this would be interesting to get kind of the regional perspectives on I guess the specific trends. Were there any specific trends that you identified within the industry that you kind of thought, okay, this now is the time that we really need to launch this and we really should move forward with it? So Linde, how, like on your side, was there anything like, I guess in Europe specifically, specific trends that kind of led to the concept and launching this?
Yeah, so I think especially when COVID was there, there were lots of guests hanging their do not disturb hangers on because they simply didn't want any strangers in the rooms. So lots of, and even though there was low occupancy, hoteliers were saving on hotel cleaning costs, right? And we were asking ourselves already, why do we clean each hotel room each day when all the guests have the need for this? We don't clean our bathrooms and change our bed linen every day, so why would it be any different in a hotel? And this is, I think, questions that hoteliers have been asking themselves as well during COVID. As you said, people had time to think, things are changing in the world, and is there anything we can do better? So we thought, why don't we stop with this and use savings to plant new trees? And this is really where it started. I mean, on average in Europe, when the stay over cleaners skipped, hotelier saves between the 10 and 15 euros, and 1/3 of that goes to planting a tree. So it was really also a win-win solution, because you're contributing to a greener environment and you're also still saving money. So therefore we thought, yeah, we must actually do this. And yeah, in the beginning it was, there were already hotels that were skipping the cleaning fully. And we're enjoying these savings, but they would also know that eventually when business was back, they wouldn't get away with it without giving something in return, right, to the guests. And what better way of planting a tree for them? And I guess also after COVID, we realized that more and more guests are trying to find more sustainable solutions or sustainable options to travel. And I think we tapped in that market at a good moment, because hoteliers were looking also for ways to save, because they were still coping with cashbacks from COVID, and this was supporting them with that. And they had still time to implement it, even though it's not costing a lot of time, but they were obviously running low occupancy, and they were also still suffering operational challenges, because lots of especially housekeeping staff in Europe had moved back to the East European countries and they weren't coming back quickly. So this was again a win-win solution, because on average, if we look at all our hotel partners, 40% of the stay over make this choice. So it was helping them, lowering their pressure on housekeeping and finding a solution for staff shortages.
And I guess even now it's still a relevant solution for the shortages with the ongoing. And how about in the US, Edwin? Like, was there anything specific leading up to that? How did it start in the US? How did and what's the impact been so far?
I'm first going to take you back to when I was a young boy, because that's to me where it started. As a young teenage boy, I was already fascinated by Mother Nature and every living animal the planet has to offer. No, I'm dating myself a little bit, but this was in the early days of Greenpeace and David Attenborough, even though he's still around, and his latest movie is still very fascinating too. But I
had his birthday recently or something. I think it was his birthday I saw, Okay. But I love David Attenborough as well.
I know he made his last movie. It's something about his legacy. Looking back over his last 50 years, it's very impressive. I've watched that too, But like David, I too wanted to save the whales and the rainforest. But then life happened, and after having finished school, and at the time in the Netherlands also military service, I found myself working for 3M Company, manufacturing and supply chain. So I got a little bit sidetracked for like 35 years or so. But I was finally able to leave the dark side and step back into the light. I am very concerned about things like global warming and more plastic than fish in our oceans and sustainability in general. So I'm using the time I have right now to help a little where I can. I also have family members, not just in the Netherlands, but also in Germany, in Sweden, in Canada. So I'm flying more than I should. And I want to help offset some of that, my own carbon footprint as well, with every tree that we help plant. So basically, when I found this concept in a hotel I stayed in the Netherlands, in Breda, about a year ago, I just immediately reached out and I got in touch with Floris, and I said, how can I help? And he said, well, since we haven't really started with North America yet, and I live there, if you want to get started, go ahead, and the rest is history. So I'm enjoying myself. It's a lot of pioneering. I believe that the US is lagging compared to Europe, Western Europe, from a sustainability mindset. Even Canada, I believe, is further ahead. So it's a tougher sell here, I believe. But at the same time, I think it's a matter of time. So making some good initial steps. I've only been doing this seriously for about, I don't know, a little bit over half a year, 6-7 months, and we're getting some good traction now.
Great. And do you have any specific, examples on ways that it's helped to sort of contribute to like greener hotel industry, but then also greener, like the wider hospitality industry becoming like, I don't know, what would be, in terms of, since the project was started and your involvement with it, what would be like the the highlights specifically on how it's impacted on the industry.
Yeah, it's early days. I mean, we have 210 or 211 hotels we partnered with so far, but most of them are in Europe. That's what Linde has been doing over the last 3 years. So I'm opening up hotels and opening up states as we speak. The first hotel in Minnesota went live a week ago. This week, the first one in California went live. We got activity ready in Canada, who are, like I said, a little bit ahead, probably also because of the forest fires they had recently there in recent years. It's been pioneering. I've never run my own company. I've always worked for corporate America. So things like licensing and 501c3s and getting the back office in place, finding forestation partners. We've got some great partners here in North America, One Tree Planted and Arbor Day. So a lot of my time went there, and now really comes the next step, and that is to help make an impact. Linde perhaps didn't mention this, and I haven't mentioned it either yet. We find most of the interest coming from boutique and independent hotels. It's
Right.
much harder to get a Hilton, a Marriott to sign up. They have their corporate programs, their corporate identity. A lot more hurdles to get them on board.
Yeah.
So it's
the chain of command kind of the approvals and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think the concept of sustainability, like we hear it so much that sometimes it's a bit abstract. Like we know the word, but then it's like making it, and I know that we'll get into this a little bit more detail later on in our conversation, but kind of making it very practical for hotels, like how to actually have a step-by-step plan to be more sustainable, but then also communicate it. It's I think something this conversation will be insightful, because we have like hotels that it might seem kind of abstract, like where to begin, how do we do this? It seems like a lot of, work and more time and effort to have to, put these frameworks in place. So yeah, I think this will be good. Moving on a little bit. So in terms of kind of innovative ideas and making an impact, and I know that this space and like having a more sustainable industry, there is a lot of scope, and a lot of companies are doing things to be more sustainable. And so I'll start with you, Linde. Like this year so far, like what is there anything that you've seen? Like what would you say is the top like 1 to 3 like really innovative ideas that have stood out to you, and why?
Yeah, well, obviously our own, but I like the ideas that involve the guests. I think there's a huge opportunity. There's so many guests coming through our doors, and I think hoteliers have the opportunity to get the guests involved in their sustainable practices. With Hotels for Trees, you do that obviously because the guest makes the choice to plant a tree, and they see their choice the next day on our website, and they see also which projects they'll contribute to. But other initiatives that involve the guests that I've seen is Orbisks, for example. They help professional kitchens to get a grip on their food waste. So they do that with the help of image recognition. So they have a scale that the bin goes on, and then with an AI image recognition, they basically recognize the kinds of food that it's thrown away and the quantity of it. And at that time, and also the time of the day, actually, so very specific. And the kitchen can then see this data in a clear dashboard. So the chefs can look at what's been thrown away, which they can then obviously use to prevent food waste in a way that suits the kitchen and the process. So they can make it also more cost efficient for themselves and use that in their process preparing for the food. So that's one initiative that I've seen, which is fantastic. I think they've also started about 4 years ago, I think, and they're doing really well. Another initiative that I've seen is Made Blue, and they this is also both are actually Dutch based. They help hotels save an average of 100 liters of water for every room night by involving the guests in a unique way as well, same as we do. So basically, when the guest shortens their shower time for about 50 seconds, they offset the 100 liters, and the hotelier basically donates these 100 liters. And then the guest scans the QR code, and they can choose which water project it goes to. So it's, again, encouraging guests to shower less, shorter amount of time, and it's offsetting 100 liters of water, and it's supporting projects in the more undeveloped countries, which is amazing. And with Orbis, what I forgot to mention is where the guest engagement comes in, is that they have signages on the buffet to get the guest engaged and aware of what they are actually emitting as soon as they choose certain products on the buffet. So it's, again, a very guest engaging initiative, which is the ones I like. I have many more examples, which I might tap into later. But these three, including ours, are including the guest, and I think that's so important to create that awareness and communicate and involve them in the practices.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, because I think also, like, there's a lot of people that they say, you know, from the consumer side, you know, it's kind of like, we want to travel more sustainably, we want to have more sustainable practices in our travel habits, and, you know, where we stay and what we do and how we impact like local communities and things like that. But then sometimes there's like a bit of a dissonance, I think, like, it seems anyway, you know, it's like you say one thing, but then it's you're doing another, but then kind of having that collaboration, it kind of increases that awareness. And definitely a very powerful way to collaborate on that common goal.
Yeah, and the guest obviously looks at labels, you know, Green Key, Green Globe, and that's also very important to them. But they know that it's then a sustainable hotel, but what does it exactly mean? Some of them don't, and it's all back of house. So I think if you do that plus a guest engaging initiative, I think it's perfect, because then you make them part of it, and they can actually contribute themselves.
Yeah, very cool. And on your side, Edwin, is there anything you've been seeing in the US, in addition to Hotels for Trees, of course, that has stood out to you this year?
Yeah, Linde just mentioned Green Key. So the big announcement that came out just a couple of months ago, last month or 2 months ago, I believe, is that both the US as well as the Canadian Hotel Association, and these are really, really big associations with many thousand members, they have partnered up with Green Key. So that is a big one, that these national hotel associations have now officially partnered with Green Key as their certification body. So that's a good step, a good movement in the right direction. Something on a much smaller scale, but which I thought was fascinating as well, is when I talked to some hotels in Canada along their coastline, the shore there. I found that instead of planting trees, some hotels have already found a partner that plants kelp in the ocean, which I thought was fascinating. We don't do that. We don't get underwater. But when looking at that a little bit more, is that kelp, of course, is vital for the health of the flora and fauna in the oceans. And what I didn't know is that it absorbs 5 times the amount of carbon a tree does. So it's a fast converter of carbon as well. It's fascinating when you dig into it.
Yeah.
What I've also seen, and this is perhaps more global than just specifically for the US, but the Sustainability Hospitality Alliance is now global. They changed their name even. So we are seeing some consolidation. A lot of those alliances and certification bodies, what you hear, it's been a jungle, right? Hotels complain about that too. So many certification bodies, so many different things, not a lot of uniformity. And so it's good to see a larger alliance that becomes really much more global now, and hopefully can make a bigger difference by doing that.
Yeah, and I guess in a way it kind of simplifies, as you said, it simplifies, you know, like not having all this noise, like, okay, who should we partner with? What should we do? It definitely can make a difference. Cool. So I think in terms of kind of embracing this innovation, because I know with any, like, let's say you're a hotel and you know, you're just kind of coming around to this idea of, okay, we need to be more sustainable. And I know, like, with different individuals and industry professionals that I've spoken to on this topic, it's very much seems to be a consensus to get like everyone on board. It's like you can't just have a department for sustainability. Like everyone has to kind of be on board with this within the organization, and then also, as you mentioned, Linde, like bringing the guests in on board. And so, Linde, like in your view, how do you think hotels and other hospitality companies can better foster this culture of innovation to get people on board, and especially in terms of like being more sustainable, to kind of get on board with that, achieving that goal?
Yeah, I think, like you said, they have to start by creating a team that will present and be responsible for the hotel's sustainable strategy. I think it's important to then start measuring, what negative impact you have, such as your water usage, electricity, and waste, the amount of waste you produce. And then I think it's also important for hotels to include their supply chain as well, because that's 80% of where the carbon emission kicks in. So it's good to look at, who do I use, who do I cooperate with? Then I think it's good to look at ways to reduce it. And eventually, it's good to define ways to drive your positive impact strategy, right? And offset what you are not able to reduce, which is always going to be the case in the hotel industry. And then besides making an environmental impact, I think it's also very important to look at making a social positive impact in the hotel industry. I think often that's forgotten, but I think with the whole CSRD guidelines that are now coming, it becomes more and more important that's also important to look at. So here you would then focus on team development, gender equality, positive impacting the community, and indeed engaging the guest. And I think in the entire process, I think that the communication is key. So indeed involve the team, educate the team, so you're all on this sustainable journey together. And then communicate these efforts to stakeholders. I think if I look at the hotel partners that we work with, and I always look, if we get a new partner on board, on their website, what are they doing? And then I also ask the question as soon as we enter the conversation. And it doesn't always match, the communication on the website, on their social media pages is not actually what they're doing. And I'm wondering why not, right? I think communication to stakeholders, to the competitors, to the guests is so important. And I think eventually in that way, if you follow these steps and walk the talk, create that awareness and encourage others to join, I think you're sending a step in the right direction. And I think then on top of that, it's super important to measure your impact as well. So as soon as you're making impact, I think it's very important to measure it, to manage it and improve it. Because this means that the sustainable strategy of a hotel is actually constantly developing and fine-tuned, because you'll be constantly improving and you'll be constantly seeing what impact you're actually having. And I think it's important then to change that strategy based upon what you find. So I think that would be the steps for me to give a suggestion for hotels.
And how about you, Edwin? And actually, it's interesting because you mentioned I think you briefly touched on like the EU. I think there's that new legislation where it's like the stakeholders have to report on how they're being sustainable. And this we found actually is having an impact on independent hotels, especially like in terms of like the big corporates and stuff with corporate business. And they're actually, unless there's a very clear sustainable like framework in place, it's like they won't stay at the hotel, or they won't be at the hotel for that reason, because they need to work with their suppliers and partners that fit under this directive. Edwin, is that sort of the case in the US as well? Like in terms of a legislative perspective, is it as like, I guess not enforced, but like, is it as on the same level as in the EU, or is it quite like, is it still catching up, like in your opinion?
Yeah, I think we're lagging in general from a sustainability perspective. But what's very different here is that we have 50 states, right? And every state has state laws, and they typically get involved into issues like this. They give directives what hotels should or should not be doing, or can or cannot be doing. I was, for example, flabbergasted when I was reaching out to some of the hotels in Nevada. Las Vegas has, I think, 6 of the 10 largest hotels in the world, right? Like they got like 9,000 rooms, 12,000 rooms. So getting one on board would be great for us. But I learned that the state of Nevada actually prohibits reducing labor in hotels by, for example, not planting trees, because you reduce the amount of housekeeping hours. So Nevada is for us a state that I cannot operate in because of the state laws and legislation. It's frustrating, but it is a fact of life. Yeah.
So there's nothing like on, I guess, the federal level that would encompass all the states. It's all just up to the states to make their own legislations, basically. Yeah.
For the most part, yeah. For the most part, the states determine what can and cannot happen in the state, and of course, there's a federal law as well. But I think so far I've seen, when it comes to hospitality, I've seen for the most part that the states get to determine what's happening within the state, and we got 50 very, very different states, so it's a very, very mixed bag here. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, adds a little layer of complexity there. But yeah. And so kind of moving on a bit in terms of, and we briefly spoke about this when you both spoke about your background and like experiences of traveling and working with different cultures. So I guess, like, in what ways has working and living with different cultures, how is it like broadened your perspective and influenced the work that you do, and specifically this path that you're on now towards a more sustainable industry? Edwin, I'll start with you for this one.
Yeah, I think we started there, right? I think I've been fortunate, like perhaps you believe, you find yourself as well, that to have lived and worked in different countries, in the Netherlands, in the US, in Belgium, Sweden, and now again in the US. I believe it provides for a mix of impressions, and it makes you, I believe, a more open-minded individual. You may not necessarily agree with everything you see and experience, but at the same time you are sort of a guest. You're not a person who's grown up with those norms and values, and it makes you more accepting of differences and things that you're not used to. So from a sustainability hospitality perspective, I think it's been refreshing to see certain countries and especially even certain cities as well to start taking a stand against over-tourism. We've seen that in Amsterdam, we've seen it in Venice. We start to see it also in some places in the US and in North America. So I think things like that, where you almost need an extreme to reach that turning point. I think we start to see that more and more, and I think it's a change for the better. Great.
And how about you, Linde?
Well, I like to travel, remote destinations and spend my holiday very basic. I guess because I've been working for the most luxury hotels for 14 years, I was always, camping and enjoying a very basic type of travel, and also in destinations where people live a more basic life than what we are used to here in Western Europe and in other more developing countries. And it's also destinations where the footprint generally is low, right? If you live a more basic life. And I think we in development countries, we are the ones that are, emitting the most amount of CO2 and are working towards, well, it's a bit dramatic, but destroying the earth almost. And I think those living in these basic areas are hit the hardest because they're most vulnerable. And even though they don't contribute to the negative impact that's made, right? So it made me really realize, we are actually the people that must act. So that's always great. Well, that was really an eye opener from me. And also, it doesn't have to be difficult to make an impact, especially, I mean, you've probably seen it as well, but in Africa, when I was driving through Malawi, there's lots of Western countries that would like to, contribute and do good and come with sanitary napkins for the local the local population, and come with food and all these things. But I found, and it made me actually quite angry, that you make them then dependent on the development countries. Whilst if you give them the tools to become self-sufficient, and there were actually we met a family that was that has started a fabric to make their own sanitary napkins, and they couldn't get rid of it because some NGO comes and just gives them all away, right? So they weren't given the chance to run their businesses because of the do goods out of the more Western countries. And I think that's also something that we should look at, to make it easy and make the areas where they need it the most more self-sustainable. And this indeed also counts for tourism, what Edwin mentioned, over tourism. And I think and this is the way I like to travel, is to support local, be interested in the local population, make sure they benefit of your stay and that you're driving the economy and not only consuming, right? In that way, we learn more, we support, we contribute. And yeah, I like to personally travel in that way. And this is what I found during my travels. Yeah.
And there's in terms of like projects that I guess, because you mentioned about I guess in a sense, like not giving the man a fish, but teaching them to fish so that you can, continue. Are there any like specific projects that you've seen that like contributed to, I guess, the resilience of the destination that kind of stood out to you in your experience?
Well, I've recently seen an upcoming, I think it was a startup that also got some funding of a certain award that they won. But I came across a startup called Ancestral Teachers, and they're offering tourists the opportunity to immerse in the local communities and support them through local activities that then they'll be doing and using the local accommodation offerings. And so this foundation, I think, they partner up with the local communities, so the people that really can promote cultural heritage by sharing their skills and values and traditions to travelers all around the world. And they offer this to these travelers that like to come to these destinations. And so they pair them up, basically. So they bring them in contact together. And I think that was a beautiful initiative to really encourage tourists to dive deeper than just consuming nature, but also just really join time with the communities and support them.
Yeah, and definitely a good way, to build more of that, awareness of the local, the local community, the culture that you're in, and respect it and honor it, while you're there. It's definitely a good way to do that. Yeah. Something, I guess, and this is a bit of it's something that I think is worth discussing in a little bit of detail, is just, so we have, there's because you mentioned, sort of the impact of those, I guess, countries that have more of an infrastructure, and we use more, we consume more, we have more emissions and so on. And this has an impact on more of like the underdeveloped nations. But something I think it's a little bit of, I guess, an elephant in the room is kind of like, even in sort of the goal to kind of be more sustainable, and even with policies and stuff that kind of gets like more electric energy usage, more these kind of things like this, like they kind of have implications on individuals as well, or the economy, or at least in the short term. Like I know that there's this goal of like 0 emissions and so on in a certain date and time, But then, we have these short-term goals, but then they're having short-term impacts that might not seem so sustainable. So I guess my question, it's you kind of look at that and it's kind of like, okay, well, we're doing one thing, but then it's having an impact in that way. So I guess I'll start with you, Edwin. Like, do you think it's realistic to expect that we could make a truly sustainable industry, but then also a truly sustainable world that actually makes a change and makes an impact in that sense in the long term?
Boy, yeah, that's a tough one. I am very concerned. I mean, every month it seems to be like the warmest month on record, right? We are not trending well, and I believe that the pace of change which we need to see is not there yet. It almost, in my mind, begs the question, like, how bad does it need to get before the sense of urgency and the pace picks up again? Where is that turning point? At some point, and this is not a good thing either. At some point, oil will run out, right? Oil, of course, is it helped us with the industrial revolution. It helped us where we are right now. It did great things for mankind, but of course, it also gave us plastic, and it also gave us carbon emissions and all that. So at some point, oil will run out, and I do believe that we as humans are inventive enough that before that happens, we will come up with a very clean new energy source. But in my mind, I miss the pace of and the sense of urgency at this point in time. I do think that even in our lifetimes, I think things will probably get a lot worse before they will get a lot better again. So I worry a lot about that.
Yeah. And I guess the tricky part is, because I think with everything, any sort of evolution that we have in our history, whether, industrial, the technology revolution, all these kind of things, it's like there's always trade-offs. So it's like, okay, there was this, but now, so it's kind of finding that balance. But which I don't have the answers for, and I'm not sure who does. It's the $1 million question. Linde, what is your perspective on this? Perspective?
I personally believe it's all about behavioral change and also a bit of system change. And eventually it will save money and it will bring returns. And it's actually very much needed for the industry to still exist in the future, right? So we have to change. And in Europe, I believe there is a positive movement, and that system change is coming, especially with the help of CSRD, which is the Corporate Sustainable Reporting Directive that was entered in early 2023, I think, in Europe. And the first companies will have to apply with these new rules and report on it by the end of next year. So now we slowly see, the hotels becoming interested, and obviously the larger companies will have to report on it already, and joining with initiatives like Hotels for Trees or others that I've mentioned, it can actually support their sustainable strategies and report on that. And I think eventually, these guidelines, they will have a huge impact. And I think also with the help of sustainability consultants, which we see more and more in Europe as well, and other great initiatives like ours, but also more education is given in Europe on ESG. And also you see that sustainability becomes part of hospitality-focused conferences more and more. So, I think gradually all these activities will make this change process go faster, I think. So even though I still have concerns, I think we are moving in this side of the world to a positive direction.
Yeah, I guess time will tell how things. It's impossible to predict the future outcome, but I guess at the end of the day, if we all do our best to do the right thing, it will hopefully have an impact. Yeah.
Yeah, and do the right thing, but our guests are also expecting it. So if you look at, return and still be profitable, you have to get on the train, because otherwise your business won't exist anymore. That's what I believe.
Yeah. And sort of in terms of like looking at hotels specifically, and I guess I'll start with you, Edwin, on this one, but what are some examples that you've seen of like, I guess there's something called like nature-based solutions, but like combining that with like technology somehow. So like contributing to the resilience of the destination, but then using technology to kind of, I guess, foster that. So like, is there anything that you've seen specifically with hotels that you work with that they're deploying that's like stood out to you?
The one thing that I picked up on recently is nature-based to start with, is that bamboo is very is a good replacement for paper, but also for the furniture industry regarding the hospitality industry in general. And so I've seen sort of like the first bamboo farms to start opening outside of Asia, so in Europe and in the US as well. Bamboo can grow on soil that is very poor in nutrients. It grows really, really fast. And it's an excellent source to replace paper, which comes from trees, of course, and other materials that are even less sustainable as well. So it's great to see a new source of that can be farmed closer to where it's being used as well. So I thought that was really, really fascinating and interesting. With regards to technology, there's a lot happening in this space, right? And it's happening at such a rapid pace as well. But boy, I mean, when you go here to a hotel or a restaurant, and you've probably seen this in Europe as well, instead of a menu on a paper or a plastic menu, you get an iPad with the wine list, or you start seeing that at some of the other venues you can use a QR code that is on the table to look at everything on the menu on your phone. So things like that, they're small things, but they're helping. LED signages to replace paper or other signages. Certainly in California, where I spend a lot of my time now, by 20, if I'm not mistaken, 2032, every vehicle needs to be electric. So you also see hotels using a fully electric fleet now, and charging stations as well for hotel guests. And of course, they charge for that. So it's another source of income. But that helps. I also think the PMS system that hotels use, they're getting more smarter as well. We have a great partner in Muse ourselves. They help with process improvements, make your hotel more efficient and effective. I believe that a good CRM system, a modern one these days as well when it comes to technology, can help you with medium-term planning and projections, what you need to buy when it comes to food and resources, so you don't overbuy, you don't underbuy, you don't expedite. So I think technology is a game changer for sure. And like I said, there's a flurry of activity in this space, and I think it's going to continue that way. So it's a big help.
Cool. Yeah, I agree that there's a lot, certainly with the airline, with all the different facets of the industry, there's always new different like tech solutions kind of popping up to promote sustainability. And on your side, Linde, is there anything that you've seen like recently that's like really stood out to you?
Well, everything that Edwin mentioned, we've seen in Europe indeed as well. We also have digital key, obviously, where you don't need these hard plastic cards anymore to open your hotel room, but to enter the room with the telephone, with your mobile. And indeed, Muse, our biggest supporter, they're great and really the PMS of the future. They're the first PMS system offering the sustainable choice through their online check-in module, which is fantastic. So these things help as well, obviously making the guest conscious and making them take that green choice. Other initiative, the Too Good To Go app I use myself. I think they use it now more and more in hotel industry as well. It's a service with a mobile application that connects customers to restaurants and stores that have unsold food, so surplus unsold food, and then the local communities and the local people can pick it up and consume it still, so it doesn't go to waste. So I think this is also a great initiative, and this was originally launched in restaurants, but now hotels are also making more and more use of it. And other examples, a lot of hotel operations here run on wind, water, solar energy, so depending on the destination, and even some of our hotel partners do that 100%, which is fantastic. They're also really much looking into being circular, so using glass made of used bottles, furniture that consists of recycled materials such as old doors and antiques that are offered a second life. But indeed also things like toilet paper that is more sustainably produced and is contributing to toilet projects in development countries. These are, and there's much more, also beyond tech, of lots of initiatives that are implemented. So I'm thinking heat pumps for warming and cooling the rooms. Water is heated by solar power as well, which is fantastic. All these things. To see that developing, it's amazing. I really enjoy digging into these innovative ways to make the travel industry more sustainable.
Yeah. And actually in line with what you mentioned before about getting the guests involved, and this is something that we speak about sometimes as well in terms of communicating sustainability to guests, prior to them making the reservations and things like that, even when they're still searching for and planning their trip. What ways, in your opinion, would you say that hotels could really communicate this effectively in a way that, is there any specific examples that you can draw upon that are to share with our audience that could I don't know, maybe shed some light on good ways to communicate how you're sustainable to guests that also kind of encourages, okay, right, I'll book a stay with this hotel because they're really sustainable. What would be your recommendations, Linde?
Yeah, well, we've partnered up with lots of software solution programs, so they support the communication of Hotels for Trees. So we're talking about upsell solutions. We're talking about communication tools like WhatsApp. So prior to arrival, guests receive an app, and then it's about Hotels for Trees and other ways how they can contribute during their stay. Through Muse, obviously, automatic pre-arrival emails are sent. I think these are the ways that we try to involve tech in our communication about Hotels for Trees. But I think in general, if guests are looking for more sustainable ways to travel, they'll look at certifications of Green Key, Green Globe, and I also know that certain booking engines allow the guests to filter on these hotels that are certified with these labels. So that obviously helps as well to make the sustainable choice. I think that's covers it.
Yeah, and I guess you see that also with flights as well. You have the option, okay, this flight will have less emissions, or somehow they have an alert or something with, you can select maybe this, or you pay a little bit more and it goes towards some initiative. And on your side, Edwin, is there anything specific that you've seen on the communication side and communicating with guests and kind of encouraging guests okay, well, you want to travel more sustainably, this is the place to come to be more sustainable?
I think first of all, it goes back to managing expectations. And I think as a hotel, you can't be everything to everybody, right? You have to make choices as well. But I do believe that there are hotels, both chain hotels as well as the boutique and independent hotels, that are making this very conscious decision to work on their sustainability image and to come up with all of the things we just talked about, and to put it on the website and to make sure that people are aware that perhaps they get certified with Green Key or LEED certified or things like that. But I do believe that there's a choice to be made, and there's even ultra luxury hotel chains like Six Senses. It's very expensive, and this is what they do, right? This is their image. This is what they pride themselves on, that they are super sustainable as well in everything they do. Now, okay, because there is no uniformity in the way we measure sustainability yet. We talked about that too, right? It's a bit of a jungle. We need to work on that too. There needs to be more uniformity as to what does sustainable really mean, and how do we measure hotels equally as to how green they are. But I think there's a choice for hotels indeed, and you have to make that choice, and you gotta make it an effort. And I do believe it is the right thing to do. I don't think that profitability and sustainability contradict. I think they supplement each other, because a lot of the ways you are sustainable helps you increase your profitability as well. But I believe it starts with an image discussion, with a brand discussion, and a reputation discussion. What does the hotel want to be, or how do they want to be perceived?
That's a very good point that you raised. And I think this might be a good opportunity for us to focus on the specific areas of sustainability, and especially with the EU directive and the different things to report on, the different areas of sustainability. So I think some circles call it the 3 Ps, the people, planet, and profit. So I guess on your side, Linde, how would you, in your opinion, describe these concepts to the hotels, and what would be some practical ways for them to implement measures within these 3 different areas, but then also report on them and report on the impact of these specific areas of sustainability?
Yeah, I think it's important to not want to focus on all the goals at once. Pick one and dive deeper, and then continue from there. But I think there's especially from a measurement point of view and communication point of view, I think there's a lot of partners that do good, and then they focus on water, electricity, and waste, and then eventually from a social perspective they focus on the gender equality and the development of the team. And this is eventually where all the CSRD are based on as well, and then obviously the piece of conduct as well. From a measurement perspective, I've recently come across a tool called Weeva, and I've seen also some of our hotel partners use it as well. It's fantastic because you can basically plug in what you're currently doing, so what your water waste is, what your water usage is, what your electricity usage is, everything. And then you can also plug in how you're contributing, and then you set a baseline, you set a target, and it rolls out complete dashboards that hotels can use to communicate, to base their sustainability reporting on, but also communicate wider. And I think these are fantastic innovative tools to support hoteliers, especially if they have less resources, to really put a dedicated person in place, or to get lots of expensive tools to get a quick and easy way to still report on what you're doing and communicate about it to stakeholders, which I think is very important.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I guess it also goes to your point, Edwin, about not trying to be all things at once to everybody, but focusing on one area and then go from there. That makes sense. And sort of looking to the future a bit, in terms of trends, I'll go over to you, Edwin, for this one. What would you say is the top, from your perspective, 1 to 2 predictions for the future of our industry in terms of sustainability, and why?
Okay. I mentioned that I'm worried about the pace of change, right? In general, but also specifically here in the US with regards to the pace of sustainability and the change that we're seeing. So I do believe that in order for change to happen, we also need a directive like the EU directive, which you just talked about. We don't have that here. You probably know as well as we have 50 states, but half of them are probably more right-leaning. The other half are more left-leaning. The country is very polarized. which doesn't help either. But in general, even the left-leaning states are probably more to the right than what you would see for governments in Europe, I would think. So from that perspective, they will protect corporate America, and even the left-leaning states, they will protect labor and unionize. But the third leg, the sustainability part of it, is lagging. It's currently, that's what I'm missing here in the US, that needs to get a little bit more attention. And I do believe it will require, to answer your question, I do believe it will require legislation, perhaps even at a federal level and not at the state level, to push things in the right direction. Because I do not see another way that the industry itself will make the change that is required. So I will look at the federal government at some point, because forced by things like the huge forest fires we're seeing and natural disasters which are picking up. We have plenty of those examples in North America. That things like that will hopefully force that decision to come sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I guess getting people more on board and unified with that common goal would be a good step. And how about on your side, Linde? Any top predictions for how sustainability, like how things will progress on this journey towards a more sustainable industry?
Well, I think, again, these guidelines really support and push hotels that really have it already in their DNA to communicate. And I think we can all learn so much from each other, and there's not enough of communication. So also we just need to, collaboratively tackle this issue and share what we're doing. There's not enough done for that. But I think there are more, associations, events, communities starting to spread these words and to share what everyone's doing to help each other become more innovative and help each other with their sustainability journeys. And that helps, obviously, but we are privileged that we have these directives, opposite of what Edwin was saying. I recently spoke to a few hoteliers on a conference last week, and it was also beautiful to see that newly opened hotels are really aiming to be net zero. So everything is done from a sustainability perspective, and also each stay is compensated by a donation to solar panel gardens or trees planted, and that's a fantastic movement. If you and obviously very logical choice if you start opening a hotel now that you do it right. And obviously the larger brands are very much ahead of the curve, and then the independent hotel where what our main partner based is our partners are based on. They either have it truly embedded in their DNA, or they just start looking into it. And I think there's a huge opportunity there. And these are also the hotels that don't have a lot of resources, and that can really benefit of initiatives like ours, and certain tools that I've mentioned in this conversation, that are not quite costly. And I think if you get these on the train as well, I think we're moving into a really positive direction. Yeah.
That's interesting, because you talked about like the early adopters or like the hotels that are now getting on board with this. Are there any specific hotels in your experience? And I think it would be interesting to sort of focus specifically on, like, I guess, the more independent boutiques and groups. Is there any that you've seen in your experience that would serve as benchmarks for the industry? And is there anything that they're doing specifically that could maybe, give other hotels that are kind of like, okay, what's this, how can we be more sustainable? I guess some idea, on, oh, maybe this is something we could consider, doing in our a best practice we could adopt maybe for our business.
Yeah, there's obviously a few that I mentioned already, but there's this, and it's also very funny. Well, it's also very interesting to see that that even the very small hotels can make a really big impact. We, for example, have a partner in Levanto in Italy, and they installed digital shower heads in all rooms to reduce their carbon footprint. So basically, it tells you how much water you're using whilst you're showering. So you just turn the water off because you're seeing this teller running and it's driving you crazy. So these kinds of simple things, these small hotels have implemented. The whole circular ways of your glassware and the furniture that you're using. Also very great stories about that. The wind energy, one of the hotels, smaller boutique hotels in Rotterdam, is 100% on wind energy, which is fantastic. And then we also have a hotel in Amsterdam, hotel partner in Amsterdam, that, for example, their entire team wears corporate clothing made from residuals from world's biggest brands, right? I mean, how amazing is that? So these kinds of initiatives. And then, one of these, I think the smaller hotel in Rotterdam, they also use coffee grounds and peelings and food scraps to breed grounds for new products. So they basically, from orange, for example, orange peels, I think they make a drink called orangello. And coffee grounds are used as breeding grounds for mushrooms and things like that. It's just, it sounds so simple, and it's wonderful to start my conversations with all new hotel partners with the question, what are you doing from a sustainability perspective? And I get all these amazing ideas from the guys that really have it part of their DNA. And then there's also lots that do not do much yet. And then I'm super excited to tell them about all these things, obviously. So it's a really nice community to be part of. I really enjoy it.
Yeah. That's really, inspirational. And on your side, Edwin, is there anybody, any specific hotels that you, in your opinion, could serve as benchmarks in this journey?
Yeah, most I agree with Linde. Most are the smaller boutique independent hotels who sort of are going all in on this. And there's a couple in Miami I can think of. New York has some as well. Even here in California. Yesterday I talked to someone on Hawaii. Hardcore Hotels was one that comes to mind. We have partnered up with the Rimrock in Canada in Banff. Banff is, I've been there a few times. It's probably one of the most beautiful locations on the planet, I think. And they are all in, because when you are there, you're living nature, right? I mean, it's you want to protect and nourish and cherish all that. But I agree. I mean, I know, and you've probably seen that too. Even the larger hotel chains nowadays, they do their ESG reporting. They come up with these reports, sustainability reports. It's good that they do. Of course, it's a great start, because if change like that can make a difference, even a smaller difference, it still creates a big impact, and that's where it needs to start as well. But I absolutely agree that some of the smaller boutique and independent hotels, they are ahead of the curve. They live this, they breathe this, they want to do this because it's a passion for them. It's a way of life. It's not a paycheck. So there's it's a pity that they're typically not the largest hotels or the most well-known hotels, but certainly there's a vibrant community that wants to do this.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, to add up on that, I was just thinking, it's also very nice to see how some of our hotel partners are fully embracing hotels for trees, but next to planting trees with their guests, are starting to become innovative and plant trees in different ways. So they, for example, now also plant trees for every team member that celebrates their birthday, or for a new team member joining the team. And that has impact on team member engagement and obviously attracting the younger generation as talent. Especially, they find ways to plant more trees with their F&B outlets. I mean, recently a hotel joined in the north of the Netherlands, and they are putting a bucket on their rooftop bar, where they encourage all the guests just, put their little change in. And at the end of the at the end of the evening, they will count how much they'll collected. They divide it by the €5 that we plant a tree for, and then they also find additional ways to plant these trees. And it's a good thing with hotels for trees that you can just enter the amount of trees that you want into our dashboard, so you can do more. So it's either automatically comes from the software solution integrations that we have, and additionally you can add more to our platform. So it really shows, again, that these smaller boutique hotels, they also have. They can change quickly, right? They don't have to request or get sign off of certain things. They can just move the needle quickly and expand on the concept that we have launched, which is amazing to see. And I'm sure they also do that with other initiatives that they tap into and then expand from there, which is great.
Yeah. I know we definitely see it here, like with the independent hotels, like there's quite a few even clients that I can think of specifically here in Portugal. And I don't know, it's like this, because independent hotels are like, they offer these very unique experiences and stuff. There's very much also this alignment with like the local community, with the destination, and kind of enforcing, like working with local providers, local produce, and everything is just very much kind of feeding that. I guess that social impact as well, which is very nice to see. I don't know if on the sort of bigger brands and stuff, if that's really so important, maybe to some level, but I don't know. I think with more of the independents, at least what I see, it seems more that there's more of this close knit with like the local community and kind of that, collaboration two ways. Speaking of collaboration, actually, and I know we talked a bit about sort of like legislation and that kind of thing, but like in your perspective, Linde, is there other ways that like, I guess everyone, all of us across the industry, be it the airlines, be it hotels, travel agents, all of that, how, in your opinion, are some ways that we can better collaborate and work together towards being more sustainable as an industry? Do you have any ideas on that, or specific?
I think we see this happening already, certainly in the Netherlands, but also some other European countries. It's more these hospitality associations, right, that get everyone around the table, involve policymakers, involve all the different parties of the industry. And I think I don't know enough about it, but that's certainly already happening, and I think that's the effective way of getting all these smaller hotels and larger hotels all communicating and being part of that community. For example, the Hospitality Association in Portugal actually had approached us late last year. They found out about our initiative, and they want to roll it out to all the hotels that are part of the association. So they're talking about it because we're also having a project in Portugal. So they found it very nice to encourage hotels to join and donate locally. And that is the way to go, I think, to get a lot of hotels on board these associations. And they'll be talking to all the different parties in the industry to make that change, to get sustainability strategies moving in the larger and the smaller hotels.
Yeah, that's interesting. And how about on your perspective, Edwin? Because I know we mentioned sort of, I think there was a certification that was kind of more of a unified thing, but in the US, but like on sort of taking into consideration the different states and the different things, like, are there any associations or like collaborative efforts that are kind of going beyond that legislation piece to kind of tighten that collaboration and that direction towards sustainability?
Yeah, there are some hotel associations, a couple, 3, 4, 5 big ones in the US and in Canada as well. There's also certification bodies, of course, and there's, Linde and myself have been trying to connect with some of them. I mean, some of the criteria to be more sustainable or to be certified is, for example, offer your guest the option to opt out of housekeeping. That is a real requirement, a real criteria in some of the certification programs that we see. Well, that's what we offer, right? And we make it fun as well, and we plant a tree. So if we could connect with companies like that, and perhaps even make it a win-win, we could be on the website, we could be recommended, make it easy for hotels to do this, specifically for us here, of course, in North America, because nobody knows us yet, right? I mean, it's still getting our feet wet here. We're new here still to the territory, and it's a huge territory. So the more visibility we can get to sustainability best practices, and make these visible on a wider scale, the better it would be. It is still a very, very fragmented landscape, with people also in different states having a very, very different perspective. So there's that too. But the fragmentation doesn't help. But best practice sharing, collaborating, and getting our name out to some of the larger institutions and associations is what we're trying to do here as well. Yeah.
If I can add on that as well, I mean, what we really see helps as well is for the projects, because we're donating or we're supporting to certain projects in the Netherlands. We're supporting to some projects in Portugal, in Spain, in the UK, and this is all through our forestation partner Trees for All. And then we also support projects outside of Europe, so really globally. But the projects that we support in the Netherlands and in Belgium, we plant the trees ourselves with our Dutch and Belgium hotel partners. And we really see that they get so motivated to do more. And it's fantastic. If to see the difference and the enthusiasm, if they really be able to embrace the tree planting process and be a full day with their team in nature planting these trees, it's so fulfilling, and to let hoteliers experience what they're actually contributing to. I think it's also very important to get that move, to change, to get that change going.
And do you have any like plans on the horizon to kind of make more of those in-person, like everyone together planting the trees, like, but in the other markets that you cover as well?
Yeah, we hope actually. In Portugal, we've been talking about it with our forestation partner Trees for All, and they might be able to put something out there as well for the hotels in Portugal that have joined us so far to plant there themselves, and in the UK as well. These countries are obviously a bit bigger, so you have to be careful that they don't need to fly or to plant a tree. That will be silly. But you can do things by train, and especially the hotels that are around the areas that we plant. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic experience, and we even had a hotel in the south of the Netherlands actually that was 5 minutes walk of the plant location. So they had told the story during check-in, and then the guest would go for a run the next morning and see their tree. It's fantastic. So that would be the ideal situation, right, for all the hotel partners. But that's not the case. But we do hope more plant days will be organized not only in the Netherlands and Belgium, but also in the UK and Portugal soon.
Yeah. It could be interesting to do like almost a social media campaign and just get everyone at the same time. Okay, hashtag this and put video footage or something like that. I don't know if that's something that, I mean, you're probably already doing that, but like, I don't know. Is that
during the plant days?
Yeah. Maybe like, I don't know. I'm just like spitballing here as you were talking.
I like it.
So it's kind of like, let's, do like a live stream. Everybody plants the trees together and we're all like connected.
Across the globe. That would be fantastic. Yeah, so if we get more plant days in the specific destinations where we support projects, I think that would be a great idea. And then it would be fantastic if that plant day would fall on Earth Day or Environment Day. But the plant season is so different in each destination. In the western side of Europe, it's between November and March, and then in the countries in Africa and in Asia, it's more of the summer period, so it differs. But that would be, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, cool. So actually, I think we're kind of a bit over our time here. But before we go, I just wanted to ask like one last question, and in terms of like looking into the future of Hotels for Trees, but then also from an individual perspective. What are you looking forward to the most in the coming months until the end of the year? and why? I guess we'll start with you, Edwin.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we're still new in North America. Hotels for Trees is still relatively new here, so we're just getting our feet wet. It's exciting. Almost every month, we're opening up new states and new territories. There's a thrill to being closer to the beginning than to the end. Despite the large amounts of time and efforts, the early beginnings always seem to take. There's always so many hurdles to take before you can get really started. Every new tree planted is a symbol of hope, and every new hotel that joins is a little bit of a mini celebration. What I like to do next, and Linde and I talked about this as well, is that we have a second concept too, which we call Meeting for Trees. And so most hotels, we still target hotels, the same hotels we work with right now, and many others. Most hotels organize meetings, events, conferences, weddings. And so we have a concept that builds upon our existing relationship that plants a tree for every attendee at these meetings, events, conferences, and weddings. So that in order to help offset some of the carbon footprint associated with the travel from and to the event, we plant a tree. So the hotel can help put that in their package. They can split the cost with the company or the party that visits them, or perhaps pass it over completely. But it's a fun second concept that I think has some legs as well, and I look forward to further working that out here with hotels here in North America as well, and plant even more trees. So.
I actually have, and it's kind of a random question, and I'll ask it to you as well, Linde, but like we've been talking so much about trees. What's your favorite tree and why?
Yeah, the Linde. It's my name. It's beautiful.
And you, Edwin?
Oh, that's tricky. I have a larger yard here in Minnesota. I have a beautiful oak in the back, which has split up. But I also have a bit of a pond. I'm very fortunate, and I planted a weeping willow there because of the way it drapes over the water. So I don't know. It's hard to pick, but those two would be top of mind. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And Linde, what are you looking forward to the most for this year, and why?
Well, I'm looking forward to to hit a few more milestones. I mean, last week we planted for the first time over 1,000 trees a day, and I'm looking forward to make this sort of a standard in the coming months. That would be fantastic. Our aim is to plant 1 million trees per year by the end of next year. So we have a bit to go, but there's so many industry partners and hotel partners that are keen to join. So I'm pretty sure we're getting there. Indeed, continuing developing and creating awareness amongst Meetings for Trees, I think as well is very important. And I think eventually, just besides Hotels for Trees, I'm really looking forward to see all the developments in the industry, and how fast this system change will be going, and what other innovations are coming up. I'm always reading up and talking to lots of people to find that out. I'm really curious. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and it's it'll be interesting to see the new. I agree, the new ideas and innovations that come out in this journey. Great. Well, thank you both very much for your time and for our chat today. It was really interesting to learn more about your project and what you guys are doing and the impact that it's having on hotels and the wider industry as well. And thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.